Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I am Tyler Osby.
And today we are discussing Sonic the Hedgehog Part 2. Tyler, take it away. That's my new radio intro. Do you like it?
That's really good. Take it away.
Oh, thanks in the morning.
That's your name. Thanks in the morning.
Thanks in the morning. That's my name.
Thanks in the morning. All right. So when we last left Sonic after his first game, it had launched and it was a success, right? Sega finally had that mascot character that they could use to go head to head with Mario on. And for the time, he was a much more modern character, one who fit the times of the early 90s in a way that Mario didn't. Mario was, and still is, a timeless character, right? We've made this comparison before, but he's like Mickey Mouse. He's always relevant, even if he's not the hottest new thing. Mario burns low and for a long time, and Sonic burned hot, and then he kind of burned out. So,
oh, Sonic.
Yeah, I mean, he's still relevant today, but not like he was in the 90s. And I would argue that Mario now is just as relevant today as he was in the 90s, right? Am I right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You're right.
So, yeah. But after the success of the first Sonic game, he was red hot. He was on fire. So Sega did what any enterprising company with a smash hit mascot character does, especially in the 90s, especially in the early 90s. They licensed the heck out of this guy and they got him on everything. He wasn't just a video game character, he was a pop culture icon. I mean, for a good example of this, in 1993, he got not one, but two animated kids shows running at the same time on Saturday morning. Like you could flip between two channels and watch two different Sonic the Hedgehog shows.
What a great time to be alive.
It was a great time to be alive. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was my favorite, but they're both pretty good.
What was the other one called? Just Sonic the Hedgehog?
Yeah, there was Sonic the Hedgehog, and then there was Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. And Adventures had like some more characters that weren't in the video games and stuff.
Obviously, you want to see him go on adventures.
That's right.
You know,
Yep.
The other one, he's just eating pizza, hanging out in his living room.
Yeah, which, I mean, is pretty cool, but not something I necessarily want to watch all the time, you know?
True.
So, yeah. So that was it was a crazy time to be a Sonic fan right after the first game. But before he would really start to catapult to icon status, we've got to talk about the next game in the series, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which predates those two animated series I was just talking about. So it's not a surprise that after the success of the first game that they would quickly get to work on a second game, right? Development started in November of 1991 by one of Sega's research and development groups. So that group had a few different names in the 90s, but it is the group that would eventually become known as Sonic Team, and that's what it's called today, and that's kind of just what I'm going to refer to it as, even though I think technically it wasn't Sonic Team until like 1996, but that's what I'm going to call it because it's very descriptive and you know exactly what you're getting into.
I'm fine with it. Let's go with Sonic Team.
Yeah, Sonic Team. So these were the people that were tasked with making a new Sonic the Hedgehog game. Originally, Yuji Naka, the director of the first Sonic game, had wanted to leave Sega over some disagreements that he had with leadership. But Mark Cerny, the head of the newly created Sega Technical Institute, or STI, which is an unfortunate acronym.
I was just about to say it. I'm glad you got there first.
Convinced Naka to join him at Sega Technical Institute instead for a big salary increase. And then they got to work on Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So this game was really built on top of the original game. So they made it faster, they made it bigger and better in my opinion, every way. I think it's just far and away better than the original game. They introduced a new sidekick character named Tails, who is a fox with two tails, which is like a Japanese legend, I guess. And I believe there's a gun in Destiny called the Two-Tailed Fox, right?
There is.
I think they're referring to the same base myth. Yeah. So Tails was a fox with two tails that allows him to fly. So if you played as Tails, you could still go fast, but some areas of the map were only reachable by him and his flying abilities, which is pretty cool. Also, Tails' real name is Miles per Hour. You get
it? Yeah, I get it.
Miles per hour. Miles per hour.
Miles per hour?
Yeah. Well.
Now I'm going to say that in conversation. How many miles per hour are you going right now?
How many tails are you going? So in the 90s, and even today to some extent, games would usually come out in one territory first, usually the home territory of the company that made it, but Sega really wanted Sonic 2 to have a unified release date across all of their regions, which was basically unheard of at the time. This was back in the day when games came out in Japan, and then it was like a year or more before we saw them in the States, and then all you'd have is like magazines or, you know, rumors about what the game is to go off of. But not for Sonic 2. Sega wanted them to release on the same day. So they devised a huge marketing campaign that cost $10 million, and they set the release date as Tuesday, November 24th, 1992. They called it Sonic Tuesday.
With the number 2.
Get it? Yeah, get it?
I get it. Between Miles Prower and Sonic Tuesday, they're really crushing it with the puns right now.
Yeah, they were really, really on fire at this point. So I don't know if this trend continues, but we'll keep going here. Gameplay-wise, beyond adding a sidekick, they also added a few new features. They added a spin dash move that allowed Sonic to spin up and take off at full speed from any point in a level, and also some bonus stages where there were like pre-rendered polygon versions of Sonic and Tails, and they ran down a 3D tube and they were collecting rings to try to get the Chaos Emeralds.
I love those levels.
Remember the Chaos Emeralds?
Levels. They're so cool. You don't really know what to do as a kid, though, because there's no instructions and you just die, but it's great.
Yeah, and I think you can do them in 2-player mode, too. There's like a split-screen version of it. I want to say.
Is. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can get those Chaos Emeralds. And so basically, like, to get Chaos Emeralds, you get them by having at least 50 rings in your possession and then jumping through a ring that appears after you get a star post, which is like the checkpoints in the game. You can actually get all 7 Chaos Emeralds in the first level of the game, which I didn't know, but there's a YouTube video of somebody doing it. And once you get all 7 of them, then you turn into Super Sonic. And he is like, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a golden Super Saiyan version of Sonic who is invincible. So then you can just fly through the rest of the levels, blast through the rest of the game as Sonic, Super Sonic. It's super great. Yeah, I think you get a slightly different ending too if you do it that way, but I'm not sure what it is, and I don't want to spoil it.
I was trying to beat this game for so long, Tyler. Remember, I talked about it like 2 episodes ago. Mm-hmm. How I wanted to beat, and if I had just known this, I would have gone for Super Saiyan, and then I would have just beat it.
Yeah.
I'm just now learning this. My 31-year-old self is just now learning this. You know how mad my 8-year-old self is right now? So mad.
I think
he's furious.
I think this way of beating the game is actually more difficult because you have to beat all the bonus stages, and they're really hard. And I don't think you get a second chance. Like, if you fail, pretty sure that's it.
Oh, it's not just the first one you do, and then you get it. You have to beat all the bonus stages.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can beat them all in the first level. So I guess if you don't get them after doing it like 8 times on the first level, I think you get 8 chances on the first level if you know where all the spots are. And then, so you may have to go to like the second level, I guess, if you want to get all those Chaos Emeralds.
Still perturbed. You're perturbed.
Sorry, 8-year-old Mike. Very sorry.
8-year-old Mike is so depressed right now.
Yeah. So Sonic 2 was very well received. It's generally regarded as being better than the first Sonic the Hedgehog, and I agree with that. I think the first Sonic is a very fun game and a different take on the platforming genre at the time, but Sonic 2 just really took everything that was great about the first game and just like cranked it up and made everything just so much better. Plus, it has Tails.
I love Sonic 2. I completely agree with that too. This is a very Team Sonic 2 podcast, just so everyone knows.
Big fan. That was the first Sonic game I ever beat on my own, so great.
Proud of you.
Yeah, thanks.
You know who didn't beat it?
Mike.
8-year-old me.
8-year-old Mike.
8-year-old me.
Well, I did it when I was
sad.
I did it when I was 20 after it came out on the Xbox 360. So, I'm not that much better.
Still proud of you.
Thanks.
Proud of you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The Master System and the Game Gear also got a version of Sonic 2. Though it was like the downscaled version of the original game. It's a lot slower and the graphics are not as good, of course. It has a different story too, which is interesting. The most I know about this version of Sonic is that he's flying in a hang glider on the cover, and I think that's just super neat.
Yeah, who doesn't love a Sonic on a hang glider?
Yeah.
A hedgehog on a hang glider? That's just good alliteration.
That's a hedgehog on a hang glider. I think I played a few levels of that game. The daycare that I went to, they had a Sega Game Gear, and they had 2 Sonic games. They had Sonic 2, and they had Sonic Chaos, which is a completely separate game.
Realized daycares have to be so rad now. There's probably like Wii's.
Oh, yeah.
Like Switches. Gosh.
Yeah. We played a lot
Born in the wrong time.
We played a lot of Game Boy. Everybody had their own Game Boy, and we were playing a lot of old Game Boy games. They had a Nintendo 64 too, which we would play a lot of games on. This was before the GameCube days, so dating myself here a little bit. But yeah, it was a good time.
I won't tell anyone that you're dating yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sonic 2 is also available on pretty much every platform. If you have a thing you want to play Sonic 2 on, you probably can. It's on Xbox, PlayStation, phones, computer. It's on Steam. It's on
smart fridges.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, probably someone's done it already.
You can do a lot of stuff on smart fridges now because they have web browsers, and so like there are
Flash games.
Yeah, there's Flash games, and there are like emulators that can run in a web browser now that run just completely off JavaScript. So if it has a modern web browser, you probably can play some Sega games on it, you know? Doom, definitely you can. There's like a browser version of Doom, so smart fridge.
That's awesome.
We joke about smart fridges, but it's actually true.
True. So true.
Yeah. Sonic 2 was also the game that saw Sega start to catch up to Nintendo in sales. They were the juggernaut of the time, and Sonic 2 didn't get them ahead, but they did. Within 6 months of Sonic 2's release, Sega had 40% of the console market, which is pretty good considering Nintendo was basically like the boss. Like anybody who was not Nintendo before Sonic 2 was like, or even before Sonic 1 was like basically a non-player. So I think that's due to Sonic's like cool, hip, and edgy like style that really sold well to video gamers of the early 90s. So yeah.
Good time in the early 90s.
Yep. I first played Sonic 2 as part of the Sonic Mega Collection that came out for GameCube in 2002. They had all the Sonic games, or at least most of them, and I loved checking out the classics from an era that I had missed because, remember, I was a Super Nintendo kid, so this was like my first chance to really play some Sega games. And this was also the first Sonic game I ever got to the end of, like I said earlier. I got to the end of the 360 version. I got all the achievements, I think. Did I get all the Chaos Emeralds? Oh, boy. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Who knows? That game was great.
Proud of you, man.
Yeah. So now you'd think that chronologically speaking, we would move straight on from Sonic 2 to Sonic 3, but you'd be wrong. Even though there were less than... Yeah. So there were less than 2 years between Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. There were a whole bunch of spin-offs that released during those times. I'm not going to cover all of them, but there are a couple here that are worth mentioning. I think the first one worth mentioning is Sonic Spinball, which is like a pinball game, except the ball is Sonic. And I think that makes total sense. It makes a lot of sense, basically because of there's a lot of stuff from earlier Sonic games. They have like a pretty heavy pinball motif in a lot of those games. Bumpers, especially in the casino zone, like bumpers that flip Sonic around, spring launchers that turn Sonic into a ball and kind of launch him through the air. I think that all makes sense. So they made a whole game out of it. And there's a storyline there that Dr. Robotnik is like trying to enslave everyone inside a giant pinball machine, which is kind of weird, but I don't know. It's up to Sonic to bust everybody out. So that's really all you need to know to play some Sonic pinball, you know?
Simple story. I like it. Just goes right into it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, how else are we going to get Sonic inside a pinball machine? Well, let's just say Dr. Robotnik's trying to get everybody inside pinball machines, and now we need Sonic to bust everybody out.
We need you, Sonic.
Yeah. So the development on Spinball was really quick. Once Sega realized that there was going to be a little while until Sonic 3 was ready, they decided they need something to capitalize on the holiday season of 1993. So after realizing the casino levels were the most popular levels in Sonic 2, they decided to base a whole game off those mechanics and make a pinball game. They built most of the game in just a couple of months, but they ran into a snag when they realized that Sega didn't actually own the license to the Sonic theme song. So... Remember when we talked about the J-pop band Dreams Come True and how they contributed music to the original Sonic, Mike?
I remember that.
Yeah, well, they wrote the theme song and they own the rights to it too. So instead of negotiating for the rights to use it in pinball, they got the lead composer on that project to write the theme song in 2 hours. They were like, "Oh crap, we don't have a theme song. You didn't write a theme song," and the guy did it.
Dude, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Video game composers, they're so talented.
Yeah, they truly are.
Beautiful. I also, by the way, this has given me an idea of what we're going to do next week, and I'm so excited to share it at the end of this podcast. You just gave me an idea, so I'm super pumped.
I'm super pumped as well. Sonic Spinball was decently successful, despite being pretty unpolished due to the rushed development time, but it was successful enough that they decided to make a Game Gear version of it in late 1994, since the racing game that they had put out on the Game Gear, Sonic Drift, didn't really do too well on the Game Gear, so they were like, we need something that's going to do well. So, another game that came out between Sonic 2 and 3, it's not explicitly Sonic, but still related and released around the same time as Spinball, was Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which has the coolest name of a puzzle game in history. It's a puzzle game similar to the Puyo Puyo series, if you've ever played that. It's another variation of the like color matching, like match certain colors and things that clear the board. It's classic 90s puzzle gaming at its finest. It was a fine game, but it didn't really fill any Sonic-sized voids in the hearts of people at the time. But a game that sort of did, and probably the biggest Sonic game released in that time period between 2 and 3 was Sonic CD. So,
Ooh.
yeah. You remember in the 90s when everyone knew that CDs were going to be the next big thing and how they'd enable all these kinds of cool new ways to play video games, but nobody really knew how, and none of the gaming companies really knew what they were doing when it came to CDs? Remember that time?
I remember this time. I was so confused.
Yeah, so we're in 1992, 1993, and that's about where we are in this sort of world of CDs. So kind of like HD in the early 2000s or VR now. Like VR now, I feel like we know it's going to be pretty sweet, and in a lot of ways it is, right? But it's not quite there yet, and we're all just kind of waiting for that one game that's going to get it there. And there are a lot of good VR games. I don't mean to discount VR, but it definitely feels like it hasn't quite done what we all know it's capable of, you know?
It had some like really big hype in 2015, and then it kind of just died. And there was a lot of games that made a lot of money in 2015, 2016, and then it just kind of started. It kind of peaked, and then it's kind of been going down since. It's climbing up there. They have that new AAA VR game.
Yeah,
and you're like a robot, and you add pieces to yourself as you keep going.
Oh, that sounds fun.
I forget the name. I'm really bad at remembering this name.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the name of this game now 3 times when discussing it with people, and it's really unprofessional, especially on a podcast.
That's okay. Well, everybody's waiting for that one VR game that's going to show us that like this is the reason to play VR, right? And everybody was in the early 90s. Everybody was waiting for that game in CD form. Sonic CD was not this game. But
what a lead in. You really got me going. I
know,
thought it was going to be it. I
really
was like,
wasn't.
am I about to learn something? I had no idea.
So Sonic CD
bamboozled me.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It was originally planned to be an enhanced version of Sonic 2 for the Sega CD, which was Sega's attempt at this like, hey, so this CD thing is probably going to take off, right? We should probably get in on that, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Let's make an add-on for the Genesis. And that's really, it seemed, as far as they thought with that accessory. So it didn't have a whole lot of notable games besides Night Trap, which we've talked about a few times on the show.
Dude, can we just do a quick timeout?
Yeah.
I was at PAX and they were selling Night Trap for PlayStation 3 and like bootleg versions that would work.
Really?
It's a company, that does like bootleg versions of these old, like they call them re-releases, but they seem like bootlegs. I don't know if they are or not.
I'm pretty sure it did legit get re-released pretty recently.
Then maybe it's just a disc version of it, because I was like, what is this? And someone was like, yeah, I got Night Trap. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, limited run?
Limited run. That's it. That's
so
what
it's not bootleg. It's definitely for real, but they definitely do like that. Well, their name suggests limited runs of like digital games that are digital games. So
that's cool.
Only 5,000 copies. What?
Night Trap.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to play it too, because I think they have the full full resolution video files, which are not great by today's standards, but definitely better than what was on the Genesis at the time.
Oh, for sure. Probably looks like a way better game.
Yeah. So the Sega CD had Night Trap and it had Sonic CD, so that was pretty neat. But when Sonic 2 didn't do too well in Japan, despite selling like gangbusters and hotcakes in the US, so they scrapped that idea of this like enhanced Sonic 2, and they were like, let's just make a whole new game that can take advantage of the CD storage medium. So what we got was basically Sonic 2, but with some weird like time travel mechanics and some awesome music. This was the easiest thing about CDs that could enhance a game back in the day. You could make like legit full-on music for it. So it's because they could use fully orchestrated CD audio, which takes up just tons of space compared to like normal MIDI audio on a cartridge-based game. They made a pretty sweet soundtrack with a few songs by some J-pop groups and one by a band called Pastiche, who I can't find anything about on the internet, but they did the theme song for the US version called Sonic Boom. I don't know if you're familiar with that song.
I want to find this theme song. I'm going to do that after this.
Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom. Yeah, it's great. Sonic Boom.
You know what? Is it just playing right now?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just hit play on my.
Oh geez, that was crazy.
It also had like an opening and closing cutscene, like a full motion video that still looked like garbage on the Genesis, because even though they had the storage space for it, the Genesis just literally couldn't play video back very well. So, but it was there. So it's kind of cool. On the Sonic Mega Collection for GameCube, they had like a full resolution version of that video that you could unlock and watch, which was kind of neat. That's how I know the song, because I watched that video and I was like, oh, this looks cool.
You watched that video like 300 times?
Yeah, I don't think Sonic CD was on the Mega Collection, but they had that video in like the bonus features section, so I watched it. And I was
That's
like,
cool.
Man,
This Sonic collection sounds really rad.
Yeah, it was. It was very neat. It had a bunch of Game Gear games too, I think. I'm not sure how many games we got here. We had all the Sonics, plus Sonic 3D Blast, Spinball, Mean Bean Machine. You could do like all the different versions of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and then there were a few like Master System games. That's cool.
I still smile every time you say Mean Bean Machine. It's just such a weird name.
Yeah. So most of the re-releases of Sonic CD would have higher quality cutscenes than the Genesis, including the PC version that came out in 1995. So even though like a lot of people haven't played Sonic CD, it actually is pretty widely regarded by those who played it as one of the best platforms of its day. Like Sonic 2 took the game in like a faster, speedier direction. Sonic CD really rewarded players for exploring the levels, and they had this really cool like time travel mechanic where you could travel to the past, present, a good future, and a bad future version of the current level that you're on. So like if you saved all the animals, then you got to go to the good future, which is pretty neat, and also a decent use of the CD storage space, because storing 4 different versions of every single level would be absolutely huge for a cartridge, but was pretty trivial to do on a CD. So I thought that was pretty neat. It also introduced Amy Rose and Metal Sonic, which are 2 recurring characters that would show up later in some other Sonic games. But finally, now, we get to move on to Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Sonic 3. Which is my personal favorite Sonic game, even though I played a lot of Sonic 2. I think Sonic 3 is like just barely inches it out. While Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, which is its own deal, which we'll get to in a second here. I can't really talk about Sonic 3 without also talking about Sonic and Knuckles, but let's take a little detour from Sonic and Knuckles here and just talk about Sonic 3.
We just pulling the car over a little bit to take a little detour?
Yeah. Pull the car over, take a little detour. Let's get the camera out, snap some pics, kids.
When Mom and Dad are telling a story.
When development started in January of 1993 for Sonic 3, the team, Sonic team was actually now 2 teams. It was a Japanese team working on Sonic 3, and the American team was working on Sonic Spinball. So when they started development in 1993, they were given a deadline of February 1994 in a classic case of marketing driving development. I'm going to tell you a little story. Which we all know
here works out great and everything's totally fine, right?
Sure does. So in February of 1994, Sega had plans to launch a huge marketing campaign with McDonald's. They were going to have Sonic all over Happy Meals and included as a toy in the bag. Side note, I had this really sweet Tails toy from this promotion. And he was like a helicopter and had a string that you like pull and Tails would start spinning and he'd like fly away. And it was awesome.
That does sound really cool.
Yeah. So basically, they were like, you need to have Sonic 3 done in time for this promotion so that marketing synergy can join triangles of success, all that stuff, right? Which is, like we said, not the greatest way to drive development, but it is a way to drive development. Originally, they wanted to make Sonic 3D, which is not to be confused with Sonic 3D Blast, which we'll get to in a minute too. Sega had developed the Sega Virtua processor to help out with 3D capabilities on the Genesis, sort of like the Super FX chip on the Super Nintendo. Sonic team developed some Sonic prototypes for this chip, but it was quickly becoming apparent that the chip wasn't going to be ready for mass production by the time the team needed it, so they went back to making a normal 2D, plain old boring Sonic game. But in the process of making this boring, plain old Sonic game, the size of the game spiraled just out of control. They wanted a bigger and better storyline so they could make bigger and better levels, 3 times bigger and better than the levels in Sonic 2 to be exact. They had also implemented a saving system using a type of memory that didn't require a battery, but was really expensive to use and had a limited number of times it could be written to. So you'll find some Sonic 3 cartridges nowadays that don't save because the chip is literally just broken inside.
Isn't that a problem with some of the old Game Boy Advance cartridges too?
Yeah, there are Pokemon Gold and Silver are a good example of that. Most games are battery backed so that you can just pop a new battery in there. But the Sonic 3 cartridge wasn't battery backed. It was a different type of RAM that once you saved too many times, which who knows how many times that is, it was just well, it's broken now. Sorry. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah, you can go in there and replace the chip, but like, yeah, that was kind of a thing. So yeah, in all of this, they had threefold problems. One, the game was getting huge, and big games take a lot of time to make, right? They were on a bit of a time crunch here because of the McDonald's deal. They didn't really have time to spare. Two, a large game requires a large amount of storage, something that the cartridges of the day were pathetically low on, especially when compared to something like the CD format. This would be the last generation of home consoles to rely on the cartridge format, and for good reason. These games were getting huge, and solid-state storage prices were not dropping fast enough to meet that demand. And then the third thing is that the saving thing that we talked about. That type of chip that they used was really expensive, and putting it into a cartridge directly ate into the budget for other forms of storage. And since Sonic 3 was getting huge, they had to make some trade-offs here. They needed a save file system, which older Sonic games didn't have because the game was so big. Like, getting far into this game and getting a game over and starting from the beginning is like really crappy and really not acceptable in a post Super Mario World era. So, because you didn't, in Super Mario World, when you got a game over, you just had to start that world over, right? You didn't have to start the whole game over, right?
Yeah, it was just the world, like whatever, 3-1 or whatever you were in, you know?
Yeah, so the trade-off that they made here with Sonic 3 was to cut the entire game in half and then release the second half after the first. It was brilliant. They got to save on time and money, and they got to sell the game twice. So they released Sonic 3 at the start of February just in time to capitalize on their deal with McDonald's. But they still had this whole half of a game that they had cut from Sonic 3, right? So let's talk a bit about that. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Sonic 3, just gameplay. It's very much a traditional Sonic game, built around speed. You move to the right till you get to the end of the level. It had Tails, but it also introduced a new character who was not playable in Sonic 3, Knuckles. So he was sort of a bad guy at the start, but later on he sort of joins Sonic in his crusade against Robotnik. I think that happens at the end of Sonic 3, so by the time you're in Sonic and Knuckles, we're buddies again. So, spoilers. But they
spoilers to 20-year-old games. Watch out.
Yeah. So games that were not like you're not playing them for the storyline.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm playing every game for the storyline, Tyler.
Oh man, the later Sonic games in later times would definitely think that was.
How am I going to write my Sonic and Knuckles fan fiction if I can't follow along with the story?
That is not a world you want to Google at all, my friend.
I realized that as I was saying it. I'm like, oh wait, this is probably terrible and on the internet.
So there were a whole bunch of new power-ups, but overall the game remains pretty much the same. There are a lot of areas inaccessible in Sonic 3, which we'll talk about in a moment. But first, so we're taking detours from our detours here. We're going to talk about the music for Sonic 3. Now, normally, as a non-musical person, I'd be like, yep, sure is some Sonic music. Pretty good, huh? But this game has a special story when it comes to music. Do you remember how some of Sonic's character design was based on Michael Jackson, specifically his Bad album, Mike?
Yes, I remember that.
Well, we're coming full circle a bit here. Early on in the development of Sonic 3, Michael Jackson was commissioned to help with the music. He'd already been making deals with Sega for games like Moonwalker, so he already had kind of a relationship with Sega, and it was natural that he and Sega would both be interested in him helping out with the soundtrack on the biggest game of 1993. Now, at this point in modern times, present speaking, there's some speculation as to just how much Jackson's involvement had been here, since shortly after he supposedly began work on it, he had some scandals that were a real problem for him in the early 90s with some child abuse stuff going on. So he had a lot of legal troubles, and he was kind of dropping from superstar status. And Sega didn't really want to associate their name with him at that point in time. Some people at Sega say he never worked on it, he did nothing. While Jackson's estate maintains that he did work on it, but chose to be uncredited because he was unhappy with the sound capabilities of the Genesis. But nevertheless, there are some good sources online that dive a little bit deeper into this, showing comparisons of Sonic's music, including music that's on the cartridge but not used, and some of Jackson's less popular work. That's a really good rabbit hole to go down. I highly recommend just Googling like Michael Jackson Sonic 3 on YouTube, and Google it on YouTube, and
they're owned by the same company. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. But that's a good rabbit hole to go down. There's some stuff in there that sounds a lot like the song Stranger in Moscow from one of Michael Jackson's albums, like that would come out later after the game. Like there was some stuff that they made that didn't get used in Sonic 3. And so they're like, well, I'm going to use it later on my album. It's very, very interesting. So I recommend doing that if you're interested in that.
What you're saying is we can go down a Michael Jackson Sega Genesis conspiracy rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's a big Michael Jackson Sega Genesis conspiracy, like, community.
Like all the communities on the line. What's the least important?
Sonic 3 sold extremely well. It didn't do quite as well as the first two games, mostly because Sega didn't pack it in with the system. I think they did later on, but it was like way later after the Genesis had been, after like the Saturn had come out and stuff. It was well received by both players and critics, the only real critique of the game being that it's just kind of similar to the old games. It does a lot of new stuff, but overall, if you didn't like the original games, this doesn't bring anything new that's going to make you like it. But that's okay, because I do love the original games, and so I do love Sonic 3, and my opinion is the only one that matters, except for Mike's. Mike's opinion matters too, especially because you grew up. You actually grew up with a Sega, right?
I did grow up with a Sega Genesis. Also, I want to backtrack and say, while I did make fun of that conspiracy, I will be looking it up later. So just so everyone knows. No, we're not going to shame you for what conspiracies you want to go look up on the internet on YouTube. Yeah. Okay.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've been there, you know?
You got to look at these cool video game conspiracies.
Yeah.
You know? But if you want to try to convince me the Earth is flat, just don't send that email. Okay.
Right. But I've definitely looked up those videos, right? I've definitely
yeah, I mean, we all watch them because they're fun.
Right.
Like, I mean, Hitler living with dinosaurs in the center of the earth. I mean, I don't believe it, but I want to hear what you have to say. Just because it's ridiculous.
I will listen to you and hear you out.
Yeah. Also, they had that movie about the Nazis surviving and living on the moon, and there was like a secret moon city.
On the moon?
Like it was like this. It was almost looked like they were trying to make like a cult B movie. Like it's called like Iron something. Oh man, it's gonna bother me.
That's
I'm gonna
really
look
strange.
it up. But then they had a sequel to it where it's in the center of the earth, and that's where Hitler lives now, and he's riding a velociraptor. It's crazy.
And there are people that legit believe that, or
there's people that believe that. Yeah.
Wow,
okay. That like the center of the earth is where like the Nazis fled to, and that inside the center of the earth there's like almost like a Dinotopia. Remember that book series from Scholastic Book Fair? Yeah, pulling out deep nerd
cuts.
stuff here. Yeah, but yeah, we should move on to the next game. Sorry, everybody.
The next game is Sonic and Knuckles, which is strategically not called Sonic 4 for a pretty good reason, I think. So Sonic and Knuckles was the second half of what was originally planned to be the full Sonic 3. They released it in October of 1994, which gave them only about 9 months from the release of Sonic 3 to work on it, which was okay since a lot of that work was already done for Sonic 3. Now they had 9 months to polish it up, which was pretty great. In Sonic and Knuckles, players can finally play as Knuckles the Echidna. He's not quite as fast as Sonic, but he does have the ability to climb, which is super important to getting to all those areas in Sonic 3 that weren't accessible. Wait, what?
That's so cool.
Yeah. What? Sonic 3? Yeah. Since this game was originally intended to be part of Sonic 3, Sega really wanted to preserve the game how it was intended. They developed a system called lock-on technology, which I'm not sure if we've talked about it on the show before, but I've never seen a game do something like this before or since this game. Like, this is like the only game that I know of in existence that does this thing. Sonic and Knuckles is not a standard Genesis cartridge. It fits in the cartridge slot of the Genesis, but it has its own cartridge slot on top of it, designed to be used specifically for Sonic 3. So, to play the full game as intended by Sega, you had to own both Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, and then you attach the Sonic 3 cartridge to the top of the Sonic and Knuckle cartridge and then put that in your Sega Genesis.
Isn't that how Game Sharks would work?
Yeah, Game Sharks work like that, Game Genies work like that, but I'd never seen like a game do like that specifically. Yeah.
Like a non-cheating system.
Right.
That is so cool. I didn't know this. I didn't know this at all.
Oh man, it's very cool. So you could put other cartridges in and like the game would boot, but all you'd get was the special levels from Sonic and Knuckles. And like depending on what game you put in there, the level would just be different, which is fine, but not that cool.
That's cool.
You could also put in Sonic 2 and play as Knuckles in that game, which was pretty neat, because they thought Knuckles' playstyle was well suited to Sonic 2. They didn't do the same for Sonic 1 because they just thought the levels weren't made better by playing as Knuckles. And also, I think maybe the game is like coded so differently that it would have been harder for them to do that. I'm not really sure. But yeah, basically you could put your Sonic 3 cartridge in, and then you would start the game from the start of Sonic 3, but you could play as Knuckles this time, so you could get to all those secret areas that like you didn't really have a way to get to in Sonic 3. And then after you finish Sonic 3, you would go right into the Sonic and Knuckles portion of the game and basically have a whole new game to play. So you had tons of this was altogether was basically 2 games in one, which was awesome. And then you could also you could play Sonic and Knuckles without Sonic 3. Also, if you just put the cartridge in without anything else in there, you could play the Sonic and Knuckles portion, which is also kind of cool.
That would just be the second half, essentially.
Yeah.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know why there were no other games that ever did that, but it was pretty cool and a neat way to say hey, these games are actually meant to be played together as a combo deal, but we had to split them up for reasons, basically to make that McDonald's marketing thing. But in the end, Sega got to sell the game twice, basically, because people bought Sonic 3 and then they bought Sonic and Knuckles. And if they had to put them all together, they wouldn't have been able to charge more for the game, probably. So they got to sell basically double, which was pretty cool.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
Again, every time we talk about something for the Genesis, I get bummed. I don't know what happened to mine.
Yeah.
It just disappeared.
But also,
parents throwing stuff away.
Just getting rid of all your old stuff, man. They don't even ask.
So mad at Jackie still.
Oh,
I have no
Jackie.
idea. I'm just kidding. I forgave her a while ago, but I think about it a lot. I seethe on it, just by myself. I don't share it with anyone.
Right. I think this is a good reason why they didn't call Sonic and Knuckles Sonic 4, is because it was really intended to be kind of the same thing as Sonic 3. So
yeah, and I mean Knuckles is such a cool character. He was my favorite.
Yeah, he's kind of badass in his own way. Sonic was cool in one way. Tails is the little brother, and everybody's little brother played as Tails because you could just hand them the Sega controller and let them play as Tails. You couldn't play as Tails in Sonic and Knuckles, which is a little bit of a bummer.
That is kind of a bummer. Also, side note, that movie I was talking about earlier is called Iron Sky. Just throwing it out there.
Oh, okay.
And they've been trying to make a sequel to it for so long, but it's crowdfunded, and I don't know what's going to happen, but they're ridiculous. They're ridiculous movies. You should check them out. Watch the movie for the first one, and then watch the trailer for the second one. Just trust me.
Do they purport it to be? Is it supposed to be nonfiction, or is it a fictional movie based on what
it's
people
a fictional
believe?
movie. I mean, it's definitely a huge, funny, ridiculous, parody style kind of.
Okay.
Not parody style, but it's so serious that it's funny because it's just ridiculous. So Iron Sky came out in 2012, and then Iron Sky, the next movie, The Coming Race is what it's called, the studio released the trailer for it in June 18th, 2019. But it's so ridiculous. Everyone should look at it. It's crazy.
Well, we've got one more quick game to cover here, and it was the last Sonic game released on the Genesis, Sonic 3D Blast. It was an isometric platformer, so kind of sort of pseudo 3D. It used pre-rendered 3D graphics, kind of like Donkey Kong Country did, and it sort of feels like if Sonic was done in the overworld style of Super Mario RPG. It's kind of semi-realistic looking and it's at that isometric angle. The graphics are pretty sweet. That's really all there is to say about it. I think this game was Sega trying to bridge the gap between the Genesis and the Saturn, while Sonic Extreme was being developed for the Saturn. Eventually, development on Extreme went sideways and Sega canceled it. So they also released 3D Blast on the Saturn a little while after the Genesis version released. It had mixed reviews, and I can tell you in my time with it, because it's on the Mega Collection, it's just not very compelling. It wasn't developed by Sonic Team. Since Sonic Team had moved on to working on Nights into Dreams for the Saturn, they were not able to make that stopgap Sonic game. It did sell pretty well on the Saturn, though, probably because the Saturn didn't have a real Sonic game, and it never got a real Sonic game. R.I.P. Saturn.
Oh, poor Sega Saturn.
Yeah, they also released a game on the Game Gear and Master System called Sonic Blast, not 3D Blast, because it was not in 3D at all, to tie in with it. But the only similarities that Blast and 3D Blast have are that Blast uses kind of similar pre-rendered 3D sprites. It wasn't very well received, and at this point, it's just kind of a footnote in the history of Sonic.
Sonic.
There's one more game that was released for the Sega 32X, which is Sonic related. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Knuckles Chaotix was kind of sort of a flagship title of the 32X, and it introduces a bunch of new characters, but it's Sonic adjacent, but it doesn't really have Sonic in it, so it's not worth getting into here. And it's a very different kind of platforming style game. So yeah, 3D Blast was kind of the womp womp at the end of the Genesis for Sonic games.
Oh, Sonic. I do love Sonic, though.
Yeah, those were Sonic's glory days, if you ask me. The transition to 3D would not go super well for them. They couldn't do it at all during the Saturn years, and it wouldn't be until 1999 when we finally got a real mainline Sonic game in the form of Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. Maybe someday we'll get there on the podcast. But I got a question for you, Mike. How do you feel about Sonic games after all these years?
They're so good. The platforming ones are the best. Like the Genesis years are the best.
Yeah.
Everyone loves these games.
Yep.
You know, I don't know. I've never met, because when you just go so fast, and you
fun.
feel like you're hitting everything, and you like time the jumps right when you're in a ball, and you're just jumping, and you're getting all the rings.
Yeah.
It feels so good.
Some of the later...
also, when you lose rings, it makes you be like, oh no.
Yeah, because you lose all your rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some of the later Sonic games would also like try to recapture this like gotta go fast feeling, but they would kind of do it by just sort of taking control away from the player and just being like, here's a movie of Sonic going really fast. And it was like not quite as cool.
It's more fun when you drive Sonic.
But I have to say, if you haven't played Sonic Generations, which came out in 2011, so it's pretty old now, that is a game that is super worth playing. They take like the best levels of all the Sonic games up to that point and remake them. Some of them are side-scrolling. Some of them are like full 3D. It's very fun and like it's just the good stuff. And I recommend playing it if you like Sonic and don't want to play the crap.
Yeah, this is like definitely the glory days. But yeah. I kind of want to go look at the new ones. I know you said Sonic Adventure is not great.
It's okay.
But I kind of just want to know. Maybe I'll just watch a YouTube video and get the same feeling. You know?
Yeah,
probably
that might be the way to go. I definitely beat the crap out of both Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, but they're not good games.
Yeah, they're not. But, man, great stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff, Tyler, today. I loved it.
What you been playing, Mike?
Well, so Destiny 2 Shadowkeep came out this week.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler and I have played it together, I believe, for only 2 hours, maybe.
Yep.
That was like max, because I've been traveling all over the place. So I did play 7 Days to Die a lot with my brother last week while I was visiting him in Alaska. That was fun. But I didn't really play a lot of video games over the last 3 or 4 days, and I'm kind of itching to. Like, I'm really feeling it again. You know?
Yeah,
and I think when I get back home, I'm really going to go deep into Shadowkeep. And then also, there's some other games on Xbox Live I need to, like, download that are just free and play those. So I'm going to look at those and kind of see, because I like having a chill game on console. I can just play on my bed with a controller and not really think too much. So I'm trying to find one of those, you know. What about you? What have you been playing?
You know, I have also similarly, I haven't been traveling, but I just haven't really been playing too much in the way of video games. I've been working a lot this week. We got some big stuff coming up, so we're we're scrambling a little bit, but so I've been putting in the long hours, but that's okay. We've been playing Destiny. Yeah, played some Destiny with you. I haven't played any Destiny since we played. I played a little bit of Final Fantasy 14 after I got my 7 swords that I needed to get my like high-end weapon in Final Fantasy. I haven't found the time to get back to it yet. I do still want to play the Savage stuff, but it's hard to get like a group of people that want to do it, and it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be hard to get people together, and it's going to be hard to actually do the thing. So I've just been kind of
intense, but it'll be a challenge.
I know it's going to be fun, but I've just been kind of putting it off. So I've been spending a lot of time just watching YouTube videos lately. Like kind of when I get home, I just want to just collapse on the couch and watch YouTube until I fall asleep.
Someone gave me their YouTube TV subscription. Like I joined their YouTube TV family because you can do that. You can get add 5 Gmail accounts to one YouTube TV.
Very nice.
They have, this is very random, but they have every single episode of Alton Brown's Good Eats on that. And I love that show. And I'm just like watching the new ones that have just come out, and then I'm going to go back and restart and watch all of them because they're so fun. They're so quirky and weird. Big fan. But we actually got an email, a different email. Because I believe I talked about our friend Rick last week. Rick sent us an email. It was very nice of him, Rick. We've been emailing back and forth. He's super fun. He says he says hi to everyone. I'm definitely putting words in his mouth. He didn't say hi to everyone.
Hi, Rick.
I think he means that. He means it. Thank you, Rick. But also, we got an email from Christian. Not going to say his last name. Really trying hard not to say people's last names, you know. But he sent us a hot take. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Are you ready for it? Here it goes. Okay, so this is I'm adding some stuff in here because we have a thing. But here we go. Okay, thank you guys for making that history of James Bond games. It is a personal favorite of mine since I discovered the James Bond franchise by playing GoldenEye 64. I will, however, argue with you guys. Oh, you ready?
Oh, no.
You ready for it?
Yep.
That The World Is Not Enough for PS1 version is far superior to the N64 version. And that comes from an N64 fan. The gunplay was solid, the puzzles were clever, and overall it captured the feeling of the movie better than the N64 version did. However, that's just my opinion. I'm going to call that a hot take. That's what I'm adding here. It feels like a hot take.
Is that the one that was like a third-person shooter on PlayStation?
There was one that was
or
third person, but that might have been the one that had two different versions. The N64 version and The World Is Not Enough were very different.
They were Tomorrow Never Dies.
Two separate Oh, that was Tomorrow Never Dies. Okay, because he said originally Tomorrow Never Dies, and then he sent me an email being like, actually, that was The World Is Not Enough. So maybe The World Is Not Enough game, because I think we were kind of N64 fanboys, I think, in our
The PlayStation version is better than the N64 version?
Yeah, for The World Is Not Enough. I might have been a little bit of an N64 fanboy. That might have been some bias of mine that I didn't realize I was throwing out there. I'm sorry.
Now listener. I want to play this game.
I have my hand over my mouth like I'm telling you all a secret, but really I'm just telling you to the microphone. But he actually has a really good point, a really good idea. You ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see you guys cover the history of the Metroidvania genre. Well, it's a genre that a lot of people enjoy and has the stigma of being named after two different series due to a lack of a better name. Because of that stigma, a lot of retro and new gamers won't give this genre a chance with gems like Axiom Verge, Ori and the Blind Forest, Hollow Knight, and many other excellent lore-rich games. The genre is always pushed aside because it is usually associated with backtracking, tedious platforming, and, quote, unfun level grinding. I agree with you, Christian, and this is what I want to talk about because Metroidvania is on my list. It's going to happen. All right, it's going to happen. Okay? But there's two other ideas I have. Okay, so one of these three things is going to happen next week. All right, you ready, Tyler?
Yeah.
I'm going to let you they won't know. Okay? It's either going to be Metroidvania. Thank you, Christian, for your email. We love you so much. It's either going to be that, it's going to be product placement games like Chex Quest and the 7-Up dot game.
Oh, Cool Spot? A Pepsi Man?
Pepsi Man. I think those are really, really fun to do. Or, and this is the idea you gave me today when you said games were stories that are really simple, Earthworm Jim.
Oh.
Because I love Earthworm Jim, and it's essentially the story, I believe, is he's an earthworm in a crazy cool spacesuit, and that's the whole story. So that's what made me think of that. So it's either going to be Metroidvania, Earthworm Jim, or product placement games. I think we'll do all three of those at one point. I just don't know which one's going to be next week. So I haven't decided yet. So awesome. Tyler and I will confer and talk about it, I think.
Oh, man, there's some good, I think the first Arkham Asylum game you could consider... like a Metroidvania game.
You go back a lot.
Yeah, you do a lot of backtracking, and it's like you find a new item that gives you more abilities, so then you go back to a place that you were before, and so there's some Metroidvania there too. Also, Arkham Origins Blackgate, which was a PS Vita game that came out around the same time as Arkham Origins. It's a side-scroller. It's on Steam and stuff now too, but it's a side-scroller, and it's very much a Metroidvania game. It feels just like a Metroidvania game, so I'm excited. I think there's a lot of good stuff there.
I watched you play where you die a lot and you go back and it's 2D platforming.
Oh, Dead Cells.
Dead Cells would be a Metroidvania.
That's like a
right?
roguelike.
Sure.
Also, it's like Metroidvania, but also roguelike. There's definitely lots of cool
Dead
stuff.
Cells got super popular. I want to play that game still. I also feel like a ding dong because I missed out. You told me about it and I just forgot to go on the Epic Store and download all the Batman games for free.
Oh yeah, you missed out.
I totally forgot. But I was like, oh man, because I'd never played the original Arkham Asylum. I'd only played City and then Night. I haven't even played Origins, and people tell me Origins is still good, even though it's made by a different company.
I liked Origins. It's kind of more City. It doesn't really do anything better than City does, but I like the story a little bit better, and it's still really fun, I think.
Yeah, I need to check it out. I love those Batman games. They are so cool. We could do a history of Batman games, too. What's that? Number 4 just got thrown in, but that would be like an 18-parter, probably.
Yeah. Arkham Asylum's got to be really cheap on Xbox, right?
Oh, totally. I'm going to find it. It'll be fine.
Store.
But thank you so much, Christian, for your email, and it's been fun conversing with you, Rick. Great to talk to two people. I like it when people email me back. It's fun. We keep talking about it,
Yeah.
It's nice. I'm into it. Also, I realize I tell everyone to go to the codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com email. That is our email that I check for the podcast. But also, if you click on the email in Libsyn, where we're hosted, or I believe any other place you link that it says email, it just goes to my personal email, which doesn't bother me. It's fine. The only reason I feel bad is Tyler doesn't see it. but I just want to let you know that I'm okay with it. So you could email us either way. Those are 2 different platforms to email us. You can also tweet at us, me Coletta, or Sneaker Elf for Tyler, ELPH. Okay. We also got shouted out on Twitter this week too.
Oh yeah,
I forgot about that. I'm gonna go find
three
that
dudes
real
with
quick.
Attitudes.
That's right. 3 Dudes with Attitudes podcast. Gosh, what a great name. Big fan of the 3 Dudes with Attitudes podcast.
Me too.
Thank you so much for doing that. And then they have this cool gift from I believe is it from Ocarina of Time? It's "You win," and it's him like doing a little. It's pretty neat. But thank you. He says can't lie. Codex is the go-to Monday morning to work podcast. Awesome delivery every week. Keep it up. The good work, boys. And he has 3 rock on symbols. Yours truly, 3 dudes. Thank you, 3 dudes. All 3 of you. I'm assuming there's 3 of you. It'd be weird if there was 3 dudes and it was only 2 of them.
Well, it could be 3 kids in a trench coat.
That is true. I mean, I just want to know if it's only 2 of them. What happened to the 3rd dude?
Yeah.
Maybe we're the 3rd dude. Wow, this got really meta. I'm into it. But Tyler, thank you so much today. I had a really good time. I love Sonic, so this was a great topic. Big fan.
Me too.
But I think that's going to do it for today. So you'll have one of 3 options next week. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I should do a Twitter poll or not. I kind of want to go with what's exciting to me. I'll probably look at the 3 topics and see which one I really am itching for, in the mood for this week, and then I'll go with that one. But thank you so much for listening. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.